them for examples of what you can grow. We also have some things coming up I'll mention at the end as well. Spring Garden Festival on the 13th at Marshall Cattle Park, where you can see fruits and vegetables and buy plants at the garden festival. You can get more details online. And with that, we'll just get started into the presentation. How you get joy from your garden, grow vegetables during the summer. What we want to talk about today is, how do you get started, and what are the basics where you can get yourself started, preparing the soil, yeah, irrigation concerns, and possible examples of tips and likely pests that you might run into and how to handle them. So with that, we begin with kind of things are usually grown in the summer. Most of the vegetables that we grow during the season are fruiting vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, cucumbers, things that you're probably very familiar with, beans and squash of all different sorts. There's very few leafy vegetables that are growing during this season because of the heat, but we'll be talking about that a little bit more later too. So just to get started, what do we need? To begin with, you need sun. One of the first things that you notice is that you want to have about 6 hours of sun, preferably facing the south or the southwest, depending on what's available on your land. 6 to 8 hours of full sun is really helpful for growing plants during this season. You might also consider how you're going to water it. You can run out there with a hose or a bucket and water your plants each day, but some people find it much more convenient to use a timer and drip irrigation system, which will automate it and take a big load off you, especially keeping your soil moist. Especially when you get busy, things get behind and your vegetables will continue in this way. Soil is another thing to consider. You're going to have to worry about, how much water you're giving your plants. Is it enough? Well, one thing you can do is test it to see how moist it is. You can use a meter such as this one is pictured on the left, or you can use your finger, just stick it in the soil. You find out within the first inch whether the soil is still moist or not. If you need to find out whether it's still moist further down, you might use a trowel or a hori or something, dig it up and look maybe up to 6 inches down, because that's where the roots are going to be, right? You want the water where the roots are. And so as you plant new seeds, your seedlings are just getting started. So of course the moisture needs to be closer to the top. But as your plants grow, the roots get a little longer, so then they might reach the first inch or two. But after that, when your plants are mature, your plants' roots are going to be down about 6 inches. So you want to make sure that their water is reaching the roots. You got all kinds of soil conditions. Most of the soil here in the Santa Clara Valley is clay soil, which is a very good thing because it has a lot of the nutrients that your plants would need. But you also probably want to enrich it with organic material. You want to work in some compost to help improve the soil texture so that you can get air to the roots and also hold water to let the plants absorb that. Other types of soil, maybe it's sandy, you're going to need to add some compost in there as well to make sure that you can hold the water. It doesn't sink right in the sand. Um, any larger than that, you might want to get your soil tested if you have a large field. You want to make sure that you've got an understanding of the soil conditions so that you can treat the problem. Um, you can have soil amendments. I mentioned compost. It's very advantageous to have a lot of compost in there. You can start off, if it's a new bed, you're going to have a lot more of it. You might want to pile it on about 12 inches thick and dig it in on the first time that you ever plant anything, uh, ever grow anything in the soil. But after that, you probably don't want to dig it up and you just want to add a little bit of compost on top. The compost can also act as a shield to keep the moisture in the soil and keep it cool from the summer sun. You can also have other mulch, bark and straw. It's recommended to have straw underneath the vegetables rather than the bark. Straw will keep your vegetables cool and keep the moisture in, but the bark will tend to want to decompose uh, and take up some of the nitrogen, which is needed to help it break down. And you probably want to keep the bark in the pathways and put the straw under where the plants are. It's a little easier to handle as well. You can just move the straw aside and do your plantings and then cover it back up, um, protecting your plants. But it's not too much trouble that way. Um, of course, you can plant in the ground, like I mentioned, if you have the soil, um, as most of us do in the Santa Clara County. It's going to be mostly clay, but that's really a good thing. With proper amount of compost, you can have healthy plants. If you have a place where you need to build up the soil, either pile it up or build a raised bed like you see here in this photo, um, which has been marked out for square foot gardening. But a raised bed, you probably want to use uh, potting soil in there because that has the proper mixture of soil retaining and soil uh, draining materials so that your plants can be healthier, won't get too soggy this way. Um, the areas, if you have a smaller area, you might want to have smaller raised beds like shown in this picture, or pots where you grow plants. I have friends who grow their entire garden inside pots, mainly because it's easier to move it around if they are trying to chase the sun around their small yard. Um, but it also minimizes the maintenance, weeds and so forth. Um, it's it really depends on your situation. Your soil and nutrient needs are going to be a little bit more, a little different when you're in a pot because the smaller contents will dry out faster and you're going to need watering probably for shorter durations because it can't contain much. But at the same time, you're going to have to water more often because it dries out so quickly. Then once you've got that considered, then you can start thinking about what you want to grow. And as I mentioned earlier, most of the vegetables you're going to grow are like what you see here on the table, uh, tomatoes, peppers, beans, whatever. It depends what you and your family want to eat. You don't want to waste a lot of it by growing too much. You're going to end up discarding it um, or wasting water. But whatever you can eat or ask your friends and neighbors, what do they like? What can you preserve? Um, if you grow extras, you can give it to food banks. Right now, some of them are not taking donations because of pest problems. But when that opens up, you can do that. To help you, on our website, we have a vegetable planting chart, which shows various popular vegetables and what time frames are best to either seed or transplant them. Many of the ones that we're talking about today are going to be in the summer time frame, which means they plant seeds in March and April and put them in the ground April or May. And some of the ones that are going to be in the winter are going to be planted in the late summer for fall harvest or winter harvest. Um, and these can be found in the web page. We also have a Chinese vegetable planting chart for some of those who want to work on different set of vegetables. We also have the charts in Vietnamese and Spanish, but that's just for reference here. Okay, getting into planting tomatoes, for example, there are many types of tomatoes, um, many kinds, different sizes, shapes, flavors, and so forth. But the ones we want to really talk about are of two types, the determinate and indeterminate. By determinate, I mean that the size remains short, up to about 3 feet tall. They can grow and set almost all at once. They rarely get self-supporting, so you're going to need to have some help, like for instance, using the tomato cages, as shown here. Uh, you can buy these commercially made tomato cages. They're good for short plants, such as the determinate sized tomatoes. Indeterminate ones can get a lot taller. In fact, they'll grow as tall as the support that you give it. If you give it a 6-foot support, it'll grow right to the top and then start draping down. Here we have some examples of fencing material that is wrapped around to make a cage. And here we have some that use rebar and various materials that construction. You can make your own cages this way, and those can get a lot higher. You can also buy commercial ones that have multiple stacking ability. You can stack them on top of each other, get higher and higher. In fact, I have a friend who has tomatoes that are growing up to the second story, and she harvests tomatoes from the balcony on the second floor. So that's an unusual way to do it, but it can be done. Okay, so as far as planting tomatoes, tomatoes is an interesting one. And the reason I say that is that you could take the lower uh, end of the plant and maybe tear off the leaves from the lower third or half of the plant and bury that whole section underneath the soil and you plant it, such as shown in the picture on the right here. You can remove the leaves from the 2 or 3 sections and then bury that. And the interesting thing is that those uh, nodes where the leaves were growing from will sprout roots when it is in the soil. And this will give your tomato plant a lot more uh, area which will absorb nutrients through the soil. Right? They'll feed plant and grow much more vigorously. So this is a trick that works only for tomatoes. Other plants don't respond as well to this methodology of bearing extra parts of the trunk. Some of the problems that you might encounter, especially with tomatoes, is blossom end rot. Um, I don't know how many of you have seen this before, but the bottom end of your tomato might turn out brown and start rotting from the bottom end. And this is usually indicative of a lack of calcium in the plant. And the reason why it's lacking the calcium is because of the irregular watering. It's a lot of water one day and little water the next day, so it's starving it, and then more water another day, and that would cause it to uh, turn out with this blossom end rot. Uneven watering is the primary problem, and this can be solved by making sure that you're watering evenly each time you do water, and that you have mulch to prevent the evaporation so that it doesn't dry out so quickly, and you won't be so likely to overwater. Another problem that can happen is cracking. This is, again, a watering problem. Too much watering when it's a young um, plant can cause it to start breaking the skin and usually end up with concentric or radial cracks in the tomato plant. Um, if it's uh, nearing maturity, it will just break in radial manner, cracks like shown in this slide here, where go up and down. The plant had just burst open from too much. And of course, then they'll start rotting or attracting pests. And so if you see this situation in your tomato plant, you want to harvest these tomatoes as soon as possible so that you can still eat them before they get attacked. Um, Tomatoes are not the only ones that are susceptible. Peppers also susceptible to blossom end rot, and also and get other problems. Um, the What you can do to look up problems, what to do about problems, is to look on our website at ipm.ucanr.edu and look up vegetables and melons, and you can look up pests and problems, home and landscape pests, for example, and you can study up on what kind of problems, what the symptoms are, and what the remedies are. So you can find more information about that. As I started to talk about uh, peppers, um, one of the things that you're likely to run into, and not just on peppers, but any of the vegetables, is sunburn. Uh, if a fruit is exposed to the sun too long at a time, too intensely, um, it's shined upon it, it can come up with a sunburn. And so what you might do is make sure that in very intense heat, you might want to give it a little bit partial shade during certain times of the day, or you want to maintain the foliage, putting the leaves in the right places so that it can shade it. Um, if your plants are starting to fruit too early before enough leaves have grown, you can pull the blossoms off, pinch it off beginning so that it'll have chance to grow more leaves and have more covering before the fruit comes out. So you can do that. Again, if you have sunburnt fruit, pick those off first because they're not going to last long. And if they break open, then pests will be invading very soon. Um, Other examples that you might see of pests that might invade your plant. Leaf beetle damage. They can uh, live on the bottom sides of your leaves and drill holes into the leaf and suck out the juice. Uh, they tend to collect in pretty large numbers, so when they start gathering, and they can kill a plant pretty badly. Uh, to avoid some of this, you could, if you start seeing this early on, especially with new leaves that are growing on your plant, you could cover it with a row cover, which is just a translucent covering. It lets light through, and you cover it up and keeps the bugs out from landing on there and infesting your plant. See other things you might see. Uh, Beetles, cucumber beetles, they attack all sorts of cucurbits, not just cucumbers, but also um, can invade grasses, corn, beans, and of course melons and squash. These are difficult to control, so really just watch out and cover it with row cover if you have a tendency to have these on your property. Um, Otherwise, there's not much you can really do except shoo them away as you see them. Another pest, spider mites. These are really little tiny arachnids. They're like spider that sit on the bottom of your leaves. And again, they suck the juice out of the plant. And they overwinter in the ground and the bark freeze and reproduce rapidly in warm weather. But you can uh, try to spray them off with water if you see them. But try not to use insecticides because insecticides will actually kill the good bugs, the predators that would eat these spider mites and other pests that might invade your plants. So that's another thing that you will learn from our IPM page that I just showed you earlier. That IPM is integrated pest management, where you try to take care of your plants and the surroundings by using the least harmful um, methods and uh, encouraging uh, your good bugs is a good way to help your plants. So let's get into some of the actual summer squashes. There's two kinds of squashes. They're really not um, different species. They're the same, um, planted at the same time. They're the same squash in many cases. It's just that the immature plants that we harvest in the summer when they're young to eat, we just call that summer squash. So most of these familiar to you as crookneck or patty pan. Zucchini is probably the most popular one. Those you pick the immature fruits and eat those, and save the larger ones for seeds. The ones that we let grow through to maturity, we call winter squash. They usually have a hard skin. They grow like the familiar pumpkin shells, and the seeds become hard, and the mature seeds are harder. And this can be eaten all winter long. But many of the ones with a firm skin can be kept for several months during the winter. And so some of the ones like delicata probably have thinner skin and don't last as long, just like zucchini. They do not last as long. So Okay, now we can see some other examples of squash which may be unfamiliar to some of you. These are bitter melon, or sometimes called bitter gourd, or um, Fugua, Kugwa, Corella, lots of different names. But these are immature squash, which are harvested when they're maybe 4 to 8 inches long. And they, as their name implies, they're very bitter. They can be very bitter. And they're harvested as immature plants before they change color. They usually start as light green, like this one, or dark green, like the one on the right here. And as they mature, they'll turn orange or yellow and completely change and get very small, squishy, very soft. Uh, and when they're really ripe, they'll even burst open and the flesh inside will turn red, seeds will pop and fall out. Um, so the immature ones are usually harvested before they change color, and they can be stir fried or cut into soups, or uh, is generally how they're eaten. These grow on a vine that can grow 12 feet or longer, and usually are trellised. You can build a light trellis with construction material, wood or metal, and have it 5 or 6 feet high, and then have a horizontal surface for them to grow across, and they'll have fruits hanging down like this. This is an easy way to grow that. It grows in warm locations. It really likes the warm weather. To grow these, the seeds have a very hard shell, and they need to be scarified or cut, nicked in some way. Here I've used a nail clipper just to snip off a corner and, soak the seeds overnight in water before planting. And these, um, this interesting thing is my mom likes to take the seeds and scratch them on the sidewalk, whatever, just break the shell some so that the water can get into the middle of the seed and um, soak it in, the sprout the seed. Okay. Another squash I'd like to introduce to you is luffa. Um, Luffa, otherwise called Chinese okra or singwa or sigwa, is eaten in Asia. The immature fruits, um, uh, two major varieties. Ones like the one on the left have 10 ridges that go around the fruit. It looks sort of like an okra, giant okra. And there's um, these can be harvested again when they're fairly um, young. The seeds are still soft and white, like a zucchini. Um, it grows about the size of a zucchini, 4 to 8 inches long. And there might be some longer varieties, but as they get longer, you worry about them getting older. And then the seeds start getting harder, and the seed uh, area starts getting pithy. It starts getting softer, fluffier, and it becomes less desirable to eat. But these on the right are also loofahs. They have a smooth skin. These varieties tend to get larger, bigger around, and longer. And again, they can be eaten when they're immature, um, and cooked just like zucchini or any other squash. Um, thing that's different is that if you cook them too long, they get very mushy. So the ones on the left are much firmer flesh and can take stir frying much better. The ones on the right are often called sponge loofahs because when they mature, they become like a different animal. Um, on the left here, in the upper one you see here, they grow a lot larger and the skin gets harder and they could be peeled open when the thing is mature. And you see this sponge-like material underneath. What it is a lot of fibrous material that spreads out and just is very fluffy. And you let the plant dry up either on the vine or you can harvest it when it's turned brown and um, the leaves start drying up. You can harvest it if you want to save space and dry it out in the sun. And then you can peel away the outside, crack it off, and you will see this sponge-like thing on the inside. Um, these can be used as sponges for washing dishes or like bathing with them. These also make wonderful gifts, as somebody said. These have seeds in them that look like giant watermelon seeds, black, and they rattle around when the loofah is dry. So this is an interesting thing. So this is an example of what happens when it becomes mature. So it's both a summer and a winter vegetable, if you call it that. One of the problems that you're going to find with squashes, especially squashes, they're more susceptible to pests and diseases when they're uh, growing in the summer. They're more susceptible than winter squashes because of the tender skin. But both winter and summer squashes do get powdery mildew, especially late in the season when it's still warm and the plants are starting to dry up as it's getting ready for winter. The leaves are starting to dry up. You're going to get a lot of powdery mildew. There's almost no way to keep it at bay. All you can do is take it as a sign that it's time to get rid of the squash plants. Winter's coming. um, Spraying some water might help keep it under control. Usually, this is something that just happens late in the season. And you can see here melons, squashes. Um, Fuzzy melon, also known as winter melon, when it's immature, it's a fuzzy melon, can be harvested when it's fairly small, oblong shape. It's got fuzz all over the outside of it. It's cut it quickly when you grab with your bare hands. Um, but it can be stir fried, made into soups, stuffed. Makes a very nice tender dish. On the right is a mature fuzzy melon, becomes a winter melon. It grows this white, waxy outside, and the skin becomes really firm, really hard. And in fact, it becomes hard enough that it's hard to get a knife through it when it's dry. Uh, the squash can get as large as 20, 30 pounds easily, even larger in some conditions. But it needs to be supported off the ground, otherwise the moisture causes it to rot. So these can be grown in a short, um, short scaffolds or structure and supported underneath. Um, if you're not trellising it, you can let it sprawl on the ground like it is on this left photo, but put some straw underneath it so that the melon is not in contact with the soil and will prevent it from getting rotten and as it matures. You don't want to harvest it until the uh, skin is tough enough so that it can last. It'll last 6 months, maybe even up to a year. Um, the trellis option would recommend low trellis, maybe 4 feet or so that you can still get underneath it and support it, as in the previous picture here. This is great. Um, and or use stocking material or cloth material, hang it from the trellis. That's going to take a little bit more work. Okay, looking at the time here, want to leave some time for questions and answers, but it's the only leafy greens that are really interested at this time is chard, which will grow during the summer season. Most of the other leafy greens will be all grown in the cooler season because they're going to bolt in the summer heat. Uh, this chard is all different types of chard grows well during the warm season. These can be planted either direct seeds or transplants. And mostly harvest from the outer leaves. You can just keep cutting and harvesting through the whole season. These plants are also prone to aphids. Um, Many of the other plants can also be attacked by aphids. If you have aphids, um, things that you can do is try to spray them off with a sharp spray of water. Um, Otherwise, you will look for them to cause um, spots to appear on the leaves as the leaves get sucked dry and they start curling up or distorted yellow leaves. They will leave sticky surface material as they um, leave their droppings on the leaves. May attract ants. But the good news is almost all the predators that we know of will eat the aphids, especially lady beetles. The larva of the lady beetles is a sight to behold. They have a very unusual look to them. You wouldn't think that this is a ladybug, but that's what they are. These are the larvae. The larva is a very voracious eater of aphids and other pests, including psyllids or scales. Um, and they will then mature into the lady beetle. Here shown eating the aphid. They don't eat as many aphids as the larvae do, but nevertheless, they're all very helpful. Other uh, pictures here. Here is a winter melon leaf. Let me enlarge that. You can see that there are immature larvae here. And here's one that's maybe a junior. It's starting to change shape here. And there's some mature molts, lady beetles up here. The next here. Oops. Please. There you go. General bred's her predator. This is a scary looking guy, but he's really friendly. It's a soldier beetle. Eats pretty much almost any type of adult larva prey that we have on cucumbers, cucumber beetles, aphids, caterpillars, eggs. It eats almost everything. It's pretty much everything. But if you see some of these guys, leave them alone. They're going to take care of your garden. And with that, I think we can wrap up here. That I think I've just gone real quickly over a lot of things, and I want to leave some time here for questions for you to ask questions. But hopefully, you'll be successful in growing your gardens this summer. Uh, Make sure you take a look at MG Santa Clara at ucanr.edu. These are my references. I have drawn a lot from here. You can use this, take a picture of this code and be able to go there directly. We also have the planning charts there. You can also take a look there for many other things, get help for your questions, any gardening questions you might have. You can send in a picture and ask the help desk. You can look for classes that are coming up.
Let's see. Is there any other questions here? Let me also, okay, let's see. From Shijin, I'm planning to plant some fruit trees. What soil or compost should I use while planting it?
Trees are a different animal. They are probably a lot more resilient. You can, depending on your soil, mostly if your soil is really hard, you might want to add some compost to begin with. But usually your native soil is best for trees. But if it's especially rocky, you might pull some of the big rocks out. And the main thing is to dig it deep enough so that your tree can go in uh, and your uh, where the curve in the trunk of the tree as it spreads out, you want to make sure that the level stays with the top of the soil. You don't want to ever bury the trunk of your tree. Uh, you can make it wider. You can make it twice as wide as your tree root spread, but you don't want to make it any deeper. You want to plant it at soil level.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Stephanie asking, what about using coffee grounds in the garden, used or fresh?
Uh, Coffee grounds, generally, you can use that as for your compost bin. I would really recommend that in your compost area rather than in your garden. You could put a little bit in your garden, but what happens is that fresh um, uh, coffee grounds are going to need the compost. And as it composts, it breaks down and starts using up more nitrogen. You don't want to use up too much nitrogen around your vegetable plants, but you can use a little bit. Just as I say, you can use compost, and but mature compost is different because it's already gone through that first phase where it heats up and consumes a lot of nitrogen in order to break down the carbon materials. Okay? So coffee grounds is good for your compost bin. Let's just put it that way.
Thank you, Eugene. We have a good question here from Sylvia asking, is it too late to plant lettuce in San Jose?
Yes, I would say, unless you have a very shady, cool spot on the north side of your house, uh, really you want to keep it away from the sun. The heat is just going to make it bolt, and your lettuce won't taste as good. Uh, Generally, you want to plant lettuce, which is a fall crop, during the the late summer, early fall season, um, because it likes to have a cooler temperature.
Let's see. We got another question here from Kathy. I have volunteer melon plants coming up in my compost pile. Where's the best place to transplant them?
You can transplant them to a nice sunny area, which has room for it, depending what kind it is. Be careful about melon plants coming out of compost pile. You might get some wild variety if you're not sure what it is. Be careful not to plant something neat.
Great. Let's see. Another one here from Jane. She says she has a 12-year-old avocado tree and the leaves are turning brown one side that has more sun exposure than the other side. The other
Mhm.
shady side is not brown. What is going on and what can I do?
Uh, well, that's a little bit different than summer vegetables, but avocado trees, um, generally, depending on the season, yeah, they will have a tendency to dry out in the sun on the sunny side. Is it getting enough water? Is one of the questions I would have. Is it getting a deep root watering once a week at least? Um, it's a case where you might have watering too shallow and it's not reaching the roots. The water's not reaching the roots, or there might be some other problem going on with it. It's hard to tell when I can't see it. But you might bring that question up if you still have questions with the help desk by looking at our website.
And let's see. Another question here from Vipav. How do you protect your plants from squirrels?
Oh, yes. At McClellan Ranch Park, we have that as a major problem. You can, since squirrels can climb, they're a little trickier than uh, some of the others things. But what you might do is use fencing material, build a cage around your plants, depending how large of an area you're talking about, whether it's as simple as 100 basket over one plant or building a larger structure that would come one plant. Uh,
Oh, I'm sorry,
Usually
Eugene. Would you
you
mind
can use,
repeating that? Your video froze for a second.
oh, uh, depending on the plant, you can do simply by a laundry basket over your plant, cover it, protect it from animal. But looks like my internet is unstable, as says on my side. I'll try to be very careful here. Maybe my wife is using the Wi-Fi right now. Uh, the thing you can try to do is screen it off with either fencing material, build a cage around it, or using heavy duty net, you can build a rough form cage around it. Uh, all you can do is try to block the animal out. Squirrels can be very voracious. They can chew through netting, uh, but you can try to discourage them by placing a net over it.
Okay, and Kathy kind of adding to that saying, squirrels are not active at night, so it would be something else eating your plants, possibly snails. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Well, rats also can be chewing on things. Raccoons are coming out at night, depending on what's leaving footprints in your area and what type of teeth marks they are leaving behind.
Yeah, certainly lots of little critters in this area. All right. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time. So I just want to say thank you again to Eugene for leading this excellent presentation. Really appreciate your time. And thank you everyone for joining
Welcome.
us.